Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, Consolidating to Secure the Future of Organizations in the Housing Stock. My name is Gabriel Magnier. I'm responsible for resource inventory management at the Center, Community Housing Transformation Center. And we're very excited to have you all here to discuss consolidation strategies, especially in a more rural regional setting with the guest Logéco. We have David Barbaza here to speak with us, and the session will be facilitated by my colleague, Jonathan. We're going to start with some introductory information. And feel free to share your written questions in the chat, and we will try and get to as many of those as possible. So, a quick word about simultaneous interpretation, which I will say in both French and English for our two publics. Our session today is recorded and will be taking place in French with simultaneous interpretation towards English. If you want to listen in French, you don't need to do anything. But if you'd like to listen in English, you can click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a globe, or you may have to click on the three little dots and more if you don't see the interpretation option, and you should find it and have the ability to choose to listen in English.
So if you want to listen in French, just don't touch anything. If you want to listen in English, as shown here, you can click on the globe icon for interpretation. Or if you don't have the globe icon, you click on the more icon, that's the three little dots, and you select the English channel.
First of all, we did want to recognize that we are holding these sessions on lands that belong to Indigenous peoples. We recognize the presence, the rights of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, and we encourage everyone to reflect on the lands in which you find yourselves today. There will be a link in the chat if you would like to know more about the land on which your offices or home may be found. And this information is available in both French and English. I recognize that I live on the unceded lands and waters of Jojage, that no treaty agreement has ceded this place, and I recognize it as the traditional and living territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. Living near the Lachine Canal, I've learned that it was built to bypass the powerful Lachine Rapids, and this construction altered ancestral ways of life and connections. Before that, this area was fertile land and a gathering place for many First Nations. However, colonial constructions and policies have displaced and harmed Indigenous peoples, and those impacts continue to this day. And I want to commit to listening and learning from Indigenous voices, leaders, artists, and makers, and to move forward with humility in respect for the nations to whom these lands belong. This webinar is being presented by the Community Housing Transformation Center, which acts to catalyze the preservation and growth of community housing in Canada. We offer a number of different services, funding programs, and also a very large number of tools, which includes our resource inventory, which you can access online on our website. That brings us to the reason for our session today. This webinar is part of our series around knowledge sharing. It is a way to explore proven models and put forward the individuals who make those possible. Today, we have our invited speaker, David, and you can find the recordings of our previous webinars online on our website as well. So, our speakers today, we're very happy to welcome David Barbaza, who is Executive Director of the Fédération des OSBL d'Habitation, Bas-Saint-Laurent, Gaspésie, Îles-de-la-Madeleine, and also the president and co-founder of Logéco. I think that we certainly has a lot of insight to share on these issues. And as I said earlier, the session will be facilitated by Jonathan Fleury, who is the program manager for Quebec at the center. And Jonathan, I'll pass you the floor. Yeah, thank you very much, Gabriel, for your introduction. Hello, everyone. Jonathan Fleury. As my colleague mentioned, I am responsible for programs in Quebec at the center. I will be your humble facilitator today. A quick reminder, please do not hesitate throughout our discussion with my dynamic guest, David. And we are very interested to hear from you. And so I would encourage you to ask your questions in the chat on Zoom. You should see the option to open that at the bottom of your Zoom call. You can click on that, open it, share your questions, and we will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. It's possible that we may not be able to get to all of them, but we will certainly get to as many as possible. For the presentation today, with this hour that we have together, we are going to cover a few different points. We'll start with a brief overview of Logéco, and we'll get into the heart of our subject matter, discuss why and when to consolidate. Our speaker can then talk to us a little bit more about the key features of the Logéco model, to talk with us about different tools for consolidation, which I think hopefully will give us a good idea of the different types of tools that are available. We'll then look more specifically at the conditions for success. There are obviously many different elements that have led to the success that Logéco has had. We'll be able to look at those. And if we want to talk about success, we should also talk about results and the transferability of how these could be adapted to your own specific local realities in your own organizations. That gives you an overview of our plan for the day, and we'll get started right away with the overview of Logéco. And I would be interested to know directly from David, why create Logéco? Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. That's a great question to start with. So just to introduce myself, my name is David Barbaza. I am the Executive Director of the Fédération of FOHBGI. We simply will sometimes call the Federation as well. I'm also president and co-founder of Logéco. I really want to offer my sincere gratitude to the center for wanting to present this initiative, which has been underway for the past 10 years, working on consolidation in this sector. And I also want to offer my thanks to the Caisse des Jardins through its program supporting organizational capacities. It simply would have been impossible to undertake the transformation of our organization. So Logéco came from a very concrete diagnostic of work that we have done with our members for the last 20 years of support that we provide to nonprofit organizations in our region. In that work, we recognized that in many different parts of Eastern Quebec, the community sector and community housing depended on very small organizations with a crucial mission, but whose situations were made fragile for a number of different reasons. There's the pressure from policies, isolation, a lack of staff, and the goal of Logéco was to create a regional tool that would allow us to maintain these housing units and support the organizations to give them the capacity to continue taking action over the long term. This need came from the ground directly. There was a clear need working with these organizations, and we needed to preserve these housing units and give them the tools that they needed for the future to preserve them for their communities and municipalities. Logéco is a subsidiary of the Federation. The Federation supports and accompanies its members, 120 organizations across Eastern Quebec, and we wanted to give this federation a tool to consolidate the NPOs and the organizations that most needed the support. And so we created Logéco as a collaborative, collective organization associated with the federation to provide these tools for consolidation. Its goal is to support the transformation of housing across Eastern Quebec. We often talk about the 20% of housing that is of nonprofit housing that is a target across Quebec. And in order to achieve that target, we obviously need to continue developing new units, but also preserving these off-market units that already exist. We represent over 70 organizations that manage between 4 and 20 units. These are generally very small organizations. In order to maintain the affordability of the rents, they have relatively few means to survive in an isolated way. Through our analyses, what we realized is that over half of these organizations were at a high or very high risk over the short, medium term. And there was even approximately 10 of these organizations that are primarily residences for elderly populations that were at an imminent risk of closure. And we therefore created Logéco to consolidate these organizations and mutualize services through a single entity that would still be local and structuring and that understands these local realities. And I could go on to the next slide, Gabriel. So currently, Logéco is 9 organizations that were brought together, representing over 110 housing units, 10 buildings. And while that might seem modest, it's worth noting that this covers 2 regions, and sometimes between 2 buildings, it could be upwards of 5 hours of travel. So this is a significant organization with a major impact in the region. And this also makes our organization one of the 3 largest NPOs in our region. And this is a structuring support organization in many municipalities. It's also an organization that is growing very quickly. The need for consolidation is very high. Municipalities are approaching us, boards of directors are approaching us, and it shows that as of 2026, we already have 3 other organizations who are going to be joining, representing over 40 housing units. And we have also in acquisition of a new space, a heritage building in Rimouski, and I'll be able to announce that very soon. I'll be going to the notary in about an hour. I have a very busy day ahead of me. And this is going to be another 20 housing units, including commercial spaces, offices for lease, and a space we're going to be able to offer more than housing. We're going to create community spaces. Now, there are already also expansion projects that involve adding an additional 50 units. So I think that gives an overview of Logéco, and I'll pass the floor back to Jonathan. Well, thank you very much, David, for that quick introduction. The first question that comes to mind, maybe a little reference back to the current NHL, the playoffs, sort of the Martin Saint-Louis of a whole team of dedicated workers who are working in the subsidiary at FOHBGI. But how many people are involved in your team? How many people are you coaching, David, in supporting Logéco's work? So maybe with my accent, you might compare me more to Mr. Tixi, but the current team responsible for Logéco, the administrative and central team responsible for the Federation and Logéco are 6 people. But if we look at all of the technical teams that are working on the ground in the long-term housing units, managers, it's about 14 people that are currently working on these teams. And this is a team that is continuing to develop with the acquisition coming up. It's a co-acquisition, but that'll be another 3 employees who will be joining us. And by September, we'll have 4 new positions that are going to be opened as well. So we have a lot of needs. We need managers. We need people working on development. We also need people responsible for communications. And as you'll see later on, communications are crucial. And so it's a large team who really focus on concrete know-how, who work with organizations who are at risk, of tenants who can have specific needs. There's a lot of knowledge that is crucial to have on our team. We really do need to have that team mentality. And I think we succeeded in that. I want to continue in that same vein. Well, thank you, David. So you've mentioned that there are risks and that you need a whole team managing these projects. So when you look at the overall portrait of your region, are there specific signs that indicate to you that a consolidation may be necessary? And so what are sort of the uh, points that you see that jump out at you of why and when to consolidate? And consolidation is necessary in general when the organization's signs of fragility are no longer punctual but have become structural. This is where it really becomes necessary. So in the 20 years that we've spent at the Federation supporting organizations, we've been able to resolve different issues, governance problems, and the Federation is recognized for its capacity to support and accompany organizations as they optimize their processes or structures or systems. But sometimes we see within a few years these problems again return and they are actually structural in nature. When an organization is putting all of its energy into just its own survival. It's difficult to maintain the buildings, that the weight of the administrative work is becoming difficult to manage and is impacting its mission. This is when we start looking at consolidation. The signs of fragility are relatively straightforward, and I would say everything starts with governance. This is something that has been clear to us after 20 years of work on the ground. All of the organizations that we support, the underlying problems come back to questions of governance. And so there's a lot of support that must be offered. And we are in one of the most rapidly aging populations in Quebec, and there is a lot of problem with renewal of boards of directors. There's a lot of also situations around financial fragility, small organizations with excessive deficits. They begin to have an inability to maintain and renovate buildings. Small nonprofits who become isolated, not just in their region, but even within their local microcosm. They're isolated from their municipality, from their communities. And in terms of the residences for older populations, there are also regulatory issues around certification. These requirements are increasingly burdensome, and the individuals responsible for them are largely volunteers who are having trouble keeping up with those requirements. And so when we have an organization who is struggling to survive, we have to figure out how can we ensure their long-term future and ability to develop going forward.
I'm listening to a webinar.
What are the risks if we don't consolidate? We risk closures, and this is something that's already happened. Logéco, the idea for Logéco, the initial structure really came from a few organizations that we saw close, which represented serious losses for their communities. There's a risk that these organizations are sold and therefore move to the private market, and that's something we cannot allow. We need to maintain these units off market, and we need to make sure that these are recognized as living environments for the tenants who remain there. For many families, these are important environments within their municipalities. We can't lose these essential environments in smaller municipalities. Before Jonathan asks any more another question, maybe if we go right away to the next page. Thank you, Gabriel. We do have certain specificities that need to be recognized. We work in three regions. We work in two different time zones. We work, first of all, in the Bas-Saint-Laurent, which is rural and remote, primarily with some large municipalities like Rimouski and others that are extremely remote and isolated. We have a region like Gaspésie. It's very tourism centered with a mountainous environment. And we have Îles-de-la-Madeleine, which is an extremely isolated area. And so we were working with different municipalities. We can't intervene in the same way with Témiscouata, which is right next to New Brunswick, significant developments around it, or if we're working in Gaspésie at a small fishing port between mountains, it's very isolated with a single road in and out. These are completely different issues that require completely different approaches. And so we need to adapt ourselves to the realities of these different organizations. These rural areas are often very remote. There are challenges maintaining services, and this is the case across these different regions. We have seen a ongoing loss of services, and if we want to maintain those services, housing is at the foundation, it's at the root of maintain their maintenance. And also, one of the strengths that we have is our close ties with municipalities. Everywhere where we work, both as the Fédération and as Logéco, we have very strong relationships with the municipalities. And this is crucial because they are the ones that we work with alongside the organization that we're helping to consolidate to figure out how it can be further developed to acquire new buildings, new lands. And so we have a tendency to rebuild that link, especially for organizations who have maybe lost it. And I can say that of the 9 organizations that we have consolidated, I have the cell phone numbers for all the mayors of these municipalities. We text with each other regularly, so they're very, very strong relationships. Um, yeah. I really am hearing how important this local these local roots are. Make sure that you are playing a role of facilitating relationships, of bringing people together. But I imagine that there must still be concerns from the organizations that you could be working with. What are maybe some of the different uh, concerns that you have had to respond to when putting these solutions in place? Loss of local roots. I think that would be the simplest way to sum it up, to losing the organization's identity, and that we wouldn't be able to meet the needs of that community. That's the primary concern that we hear when we meet with boards of directors. It's less the case with municipalities because I think partially because they know us a little bit better. They sometimes have a bit more of a macro perspective. They have contact with other municipalities where we are working. We have more municipalities who will reach out to us directly. It's often the board of the organization itself who are worried about losing that local specificity. These are environments that have been created by the community for their own needs, and it's important to respect that. Um, we have to understand that it's not that they are lacking expertise or effort or experience, but it's usually that they don't have the tools that they need. And so, really maintaining these local roots is the most important thing for Logéco. A continuity in the missions of these organizations. All of the NPOs that we have brought together and those that we hope to bring in the future are going to continue meeting the needs of their local communities. In Témiscouata, we are housing people in Témiscouata, and there are jobs for people in Témiscouata. It's the same thing in Gaspésie, in Rivière-du-Loup. We are maintaining those local roots. There is a need for mutualization. That's how we are able to help these organizations modernize, improve, develop from a position of strength. But our consolidation really seeks to create a safety net. We maintain a presence and the understanding of those local needs, but to provide real security to continue offering this housing in these areas. And so there is a real continuum of the services that you offer. And I think it would be interesting to talk a little bit more about the specific features of your model and of the different services that you offer. So I'd like to hear more about that. Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for the slide. So yes, we do have a continuum of services. Logéco isn't just mergers, it's a whole toolbox of services available to the community. These are practices and procedures that we've been working on for close to 10 years now. It's not something we've just come up with. And we've now really put Logéco in place, and we have a development model and a business model that is reproducible, that we share with other federations of NPOs who are also interested in putting something similar in place. This is something that we've been working on very hard. We've been working also with CS to help document all these different tools. So we have three pillars of what we provide, and these focus on consolidating, optimizing, mobilizing, and developing. So we arrive and we seek to consolidate and preserve the organization. This is preserving the housing stock, the organizational structure, consolidation of the operations and the know-how that exists within the organization. We transfer this know-how to Logéco. Is when we arrive in an organization, they already have their own ways of doing things. And we ensure that we are transferring that knowledge, and we make sure that we're maintaining the offer of the housing and its affordability. So just to make it clear, all of these units are at least 25% under market rental rates, and we make sure to maintain that. We then optimize and mobilize. We mutualize resources. We mobilize assets. We're talking here about equity. We can come back to that. And we optimize the finances. And we have a strategic alignment of the organizations around Logéco's portfolios. And this is so that we can align Logéco's work with the organizations. We then work on developing and acquiring. So now the organization is in place, it has been strengthened, it's integrated into Logéco. The tenants are happy, we are well connected to the municipality, and we look around. What's happening in this area? Can we acquire new buildings? Can we transform public or heritage building? And this is something we're doing. The building that we are acquiring is a heritage building that's being repurposed. Maybe we can develop new units. We can modernize or renovate the buildings that we are working with. And in doing this, by merging these organizations, we have already invested over $200,000 into work. This is our own fund that's been being put into this work. 90% of the units in Témiscouata have been renovated, but across all of our housing stock, 90% of the units have been renovated since we have taken possession of them. This is a major investment that we've been able to put in place, and that work is continuing all the time. And this is obviously continued work. And this is an interesting point, the use of equity that allows you to go a little bit further. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit more. Yeah, so in our model, equity is not seen as something that should be left sleeping. It's imaginary. It's not, I don't want to get too far into the details of how it's defined, but equity becomes a collective lever. It really becomes a motor for the region's development. And we are working on right now a structural fund for the entire region, not just for Logéco, but for potentially any NPO that wants to develop itself in the Bas-Saint-Laurent, Gaspésie, and Îles-de-la-Madeleine. And so we want to mobilize this equity to create investment funds to support renovations, acquisitions. We are also a member of the Fonds Plancher, which the center knows well. It also has a mission to mobilize equity across Quebec. And so for us, equity isn't something that needs to be left sleeping. It's a real lever for collective action that we can create funds to which many different people can invest. And this is a very important aspect of our model. And we want to try and transform our logic away from projects to portfolios. We no longer want to work on projects, project by project, but with a global, holistic vision. And the portfolio perspective allows us to view projects in this broader context. We want to be organized around Logéco's strategy of consolidation. And so through our portfolios, we want to mobilize equity. We've already been able to use equity to organize this acquisition in Rimouski, which will be announced over the coming weeks, as I've mentioned. We want to govern assets from this collective perspective. We have a strategic governance framework that allows for a mobilization of existing buildings. And this can allow us to have a decisive impact on operational capacity, not just of our organization, but of the region. And so we had all these different organizations who were isolated, unstructured, separated. By bringing them together, we're also bringing together the equity and the assets that can be mobilized. And so we have a team who has been professionalized, who can really understand when the equity can be mobilized through discussions with municipalities. So I think equity is an extremely important support to Logéco's development. Well, I think governance, as you've said, is crucial. So maybe you could talk with us a little bit more, just a couple of minutes to touch on that point. And then I think we'll be able to come back again to local governance afterward. So governance is, and so we are a subsidiary of the Federation. It's participatory. It is a democratic governance through the General Assembly of active members, the people who run the NPOs and buildings. They appoint or elect the board of directors to the Federation, and they delegate 3 representatives of the members to the board of directors of Logéco. Of course, Logéco needs expertise, needs specific skill sets in order to be a qualified organization, as we are, and a qualified developer, which is why on our board of directors, we've also have a technical expertise, who is a director for technical resources in Gaspésie. We have representative institutions who believe in us, who invest in us, like the FOHBGI. We have Béatrice Taché, who is a member of the board of directors. We have a representative also of the municipalities, because the expertise of the municipalities is also very important to Logéco's mission. And so, of course, we also have representatives of the members of the federations, the NPOs in the region. They have a right to participate and keep an eye on Logéco's strategy. And our goal through this, I was going to say government, but through this governance, we want to try and ensure that we are maintaining the strong local roots, which is why we want to make sure that we have people who know the region well, who understand its realities, who represent the territory sitting on our board of directors. Logéco acts as a regional safety net. We adapt every solution to each organization. It's extremely important to be clear about this. We've developed a coalition of partners around an urgency to take action in order to act and not lose these organizations and housing units. And so we are operating in a situation of urgency, and we've coalesced around that with a will to act and a collective vision to work towards its consolidation and to then develop based on what's already there. Sorry, that's a little issue with my mouse there. So obviously, David, local governance, this regional vision from a, there's a practical question that we have here in the chat about logical structure. How do the NPOs join Logéco? Do they merge with Logéco? Do they sell their assets and property to Logéco? How does it work? Well, I think I could do a full webinar just on this one question. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I don't want to get too technical. Currently, Logéco is the product of 5 mergers, which created Logéco since 2017. There was a first merger, then a second, then a third, and then there were 2 others that were added to it to create Logéco. So Logéco, as such, is the merger of these different organizations. So I think this might actually be the next slide. So how does the process work? So this is obviously a very quick synthesis. Each of these steps is pages and pages of processes. But once we have validated the integration process into Logéco, there are a number of different possibilities. There's pure acquisition, which can be done. There can be the change in the parent, and so they're essentially changing the structure under which it is organizing. Logéco would become the NPO operator for the building, and mergers are also a potential option. And this really depends on each organization. It has its own agreements for how they're already operating. They have different missions. And so we begin always with a diagnostic of the organization, its governance, its processes, and then it gives us a clearer idea of where we are going, which model we would adopt in order to integrate the organization into Logéco. But what you see here is a very long process. It requires patience, it requires time. We hope that the processes will continue improving. We work regularly with the Housing Network of Quebec. We're working always to improve and that others could potentially go faster. We're always trying to accelerate the processes, but often these processes take 3, 4, 5 years. They're very long, exhaustive processes, but we always begin with a diagnostic. If there is a possibility for development, we will support them in development. If it's become too fragile, it will be acquired in some way. We'll put in a new board of directors, restructure financially, mutualize resources. So we will mutualize management, accounting, kitchens for the residences for elderly populations. But the specific local ways of doing things are maintained. And once we have a good understanding of the organization, its territorial context, then we look at the different acquisition possibilities, and that could be any of the different options that I mentioned earlier. So we do have a few different tools that we use for the diagnostic. And so again, this is a very high level view. Each of these lines involves a large number of different questions that are asked, but we will evaluate the board of directors, if it's well implemented, if there are a good renewal, or if there are potentially issues with that renewal or governance over long term, how they could join Logéco. For example, the organization here that was kept confidential was an organization that would join Logéco, even though the risk is considered medium, which isn't extremely high. And we obviously never force an organization to join. We propose a solution, and often we are approached to come and propose those solutions. So what you can see here is the high-level overview of financial analysis. And this is the highest level. There's 20 tabs in this Excel sheet, but we analyze debt ratios, operating funds. We will ask for a few years of financial data in order to analyze its evolution over time. We will look at expenses and revenues. We have a very deep analysis of the organization before it can be brought into Logéco. Just a quick word on this point. All of these tools are going to be consolidated. We're currently working with CS in order to develop the tools, consolidate them, to be able to share them. So these are all tools that we plan to share as we work with the center, with CS. And as I said, this represents 10 years of learning, and we're finally at a place now after these 10 years where we are again reworking our tools, potentially simplifying some of them. And so this summer, we're going to have a strategic retreat to consider consolidating the tools with everything that we've learned over this decade. Well, thank you very much, David. Maybe I'll just take a quick minute because there are a number of questions that have been asked. For example, we have Stéphane, who that people will often approach you. And so the question here is timing. If people are coming and knocking on the door, is that usually how it works? Yeah, up till now, that's pretty much been how it's gone. So just very quickly.
L'opération on a commencé à faire une grande opération de fusion. On travaillait dessus depuis 2017, mais c'est en 2022 qu'on a fait vraiment la grande opération de fusion qui a commencé à regrouper plusieurs organismes. Et à partir de là, en fait, nous, comme on faisait un travail
that we were undertaking work. We're working democratically with the Federation's members. It's explained to those members. And as soon as this was communicated to them, before we even had any real numbers, we already had people coming and approaching us. That's where we said, okay, well, no, we need to create our brand around this consolidation. That's why we really created Logéco with this goal of consolidating and developing. We've only really just started our own communication efforts, but we, I would say, are approached more than we are communicating proactively about our own work. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. No, there certainly is a lot of work to be done, and there must, of course, be success factors involved in that work. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that. Just wanted to let you know that we are on time. We're just 2 minutes over what we had planned, so it's going very well. But I think if you want to talk with us a little bit more about these key success factors. Well, in terms of conditions for success, the first and maybe most important is clarity. When we meet with municipalities, with boards of directors, tenants, organizations, stakeholders, all the different stakeholders around the nonprofit organizations, you need to be extremely clear across the process. So you saw our little table for the integration process, and that will all be explained in detail. I mean, in detail, a very detailed explanation. We bring together the board of directors, the municipality, first and foremost, to explain that if they were to decide to bring Logéco in, and we make it very clear that this is their decision to be made, we explain exactly how it will work. If it's going to take 3 hours on a Monday night until 11 p.m., that's the time it takes. If we have to come back, present again, answer more questions, we'll do it. If we have to spend hours on the phone with the mayor, with the chair, we will do it. We have always had the same systematic approach. We make very clear what will happen. It's important to reassure them. Second is engagement. And to be very, very clear that the members of the board of directors, the members of the municipality are mobilized and engaged in this process. So we have these meetings, as I said, and we also work with them to prepare the diagnostics, the documents. And it's crucial that we have all of the different documentation for the organization to really understand its specific realities. And this takes a great deal of time. And then I'll go on right away to point 4, the communication, just to say that all of these steps involve communication, planning, anticipation, and it requires us to be extremely structured and systematic. We must always do the same things. We have a tool for frequently asked questions that we get often that clearly explain where we're going. I would say about 75% of the work is communication around the process. So to say this takes a lot of patience, of understanding. When I say that the team around me, and I want to give them a little shout out because I know some of them are on the webinar here, this is all real know-how. You have to be present, available, to non-judgmental. There's many NPOs who have, haven't had the resources they need, haven't had the tools that they need. And what we're there to do is to provide understanding, support, and the structure necessary for their future. And it's crucial here that we never want to force anyone. The solutions are tailored to each organization, and the decisions are always arrived at through co-construction. And so I often come back to etymology. Consolidation comes from consolidate. And so you are solidifying together. In the very etymology of our mission to consolidate, this is something that must be done collectively and together. And this is really important. The quality of relationships. Everything that I've mentioned up to now underlies the quality of the relationship. This approach around clarity of engagement, of the ways of making it clear that the solutions will be co-constructed through planning. This creates good relationships. It produces trust and relationships where we really prioritize humanity and community. It means that we are always going forward together with organizations. And it's also very important to always be clear with the use of equity. This is an extremely important structuring tool. So from the very start, we have a clear communication around what we intend to do with their equity, what it'll be used for, because it won't necessarily be used just for their own organization. It could be used across their region through the MRC. And so there is work to be done on that point as well to reassure organizations on these points. Many different conditions for success. And it's clear that there's obviously a lot of technical knowledge that's necessary, tools, systematic approaches that are structured and organized. And obviously, you prioritize the importance of more concrete know-how and how crucial that is to the mission when you're really focusing on community needs. And I think that this is something we see very clearly in your model. But I do have a question from Sofiane, who wants to know what are your funding sources? So you talk about the use of liquidity, but I imagine there must be different sources of funding that allow you to accomplish your mission. So if you could just touch on that in a few seconds. So I'll focus here on Logéco in order to launch the structure and its planning. We got funding from the Caisse Économie Solidaire des Jardins, and that allows us to restructure the federation. And Logéco, it really is a concrete outcome of the call for projects to support organizational capacity. We submitted to the first call for projects on that program, and Logéco is the outcome of that project. And we received a grant to really structure and plan Logéco. I would say that I had the opportunity to complete my master's program in project management at that point. And so I was able to essentially do a lot of that work essentially for free for the organization, for the federation. But that's something that almost certainly would require funding. And we also received some funding from the center that allowed us to work, complement the funding from Desjardins. But otherwise, Logéco operates without any funding. We work off of our revenue for rent, the rent supplement program, and that allows us to hire the staff that we need. And the portfolio-based structure of the organization allows us to mutualize resources. Certainly, we are going to need support in order to meet the level of need that we see. We may eventually require additional funding, but I would say that things are going well. Right now, we're able to bring on 2 or 3 organizations a year. We would like to get up to 5 organizations a year, and we're working on that. And I think that we may hit that objective this year. I think with the additional organizations that will be added to Logéco will hit a critical mass that allows us to continue going forward autonomously. And we think it requires about 13 new organizations to join. And that's about the number of organizations we're currently in discussions with. So I would say things are going well. Well, it does seem like it's going well. And we've seen that there have been results clearly. And so just before talking a little bit more about those results and maybe before talking about how this initiative could be transferable. Well, we already have a lot of trust with our partners, and sometimes the work with tenants can take longer. They see a new organization, a new structure, which is larger, arriving. It can take more time to rebuild that relationship. Mostly tenants are happy. However, we've had some great comments and feedback from tenants. We have good relationships. You can tell about tenants who are very happy to have a full package. Usually, when it's time to, if we have a unit that's liberated, we'll renovate it completely before new tenants come in. They're very happy with that. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges. We also manage these 3 residences for assisted living. And so we've seen, concrete results have also been confidence and trust for municipalities. We often arrive in places where organizations have been isolated from their communities. And so we arrive, we rebuild the relationship with the municipality, we maintain the buildings across the 9 organizations currently in Logéco and the 3 that will be joining us. I think it's about half of those that we saved. That without us, these units would no longer exist. They would have been sold to a private operator, rent would have exploded. And so we have maintained affordable units off market. And I think we talk a lot about innovation, and that requires structure. And to build capacity, it requires structure. And so I think this is a sector that requires structure, and we support organizations with that. I think Logéco has already demonstrated results through its structures and the support that it can offer to NPOs through these efforts to create structure. We have new regional investment opportunities that are going to be made available thanks to different discussions that we've had with our partners. We've already had very concrete results on those points as well. We are going to be rehabilitating a heritage building in Rimouski very soon. And we've seen very tangible results, partnerships with technical resources, with promoters in the region. So we work with a lot of different stakeholders across the region. We have this portfolio-based approach that allows us to always remain focused on Logéco's strategy of using resources as effectively as possible to meet needs. So if at any point we see that our resources are, need to be reorganized, we always know where to put them. And so I think it's important to be careful about how we approach development. And this portfolio-based approach really gives us a pipeline of projects that allows us to see where we are in each area, which might require additional resources, what should be prioritized. And so this is a very structuring approach for us. We have a real capacity for development and acquisition, and we have given ourselves that capacity, and we're going to demonstrate that with our acquisition. We've already demonstrated it with the acquisitions and development projects that are underway, and we have a long-term vision. Following our analyses, we know that the number of housing units of organizations that must be consolidated. Our goal is by 2035 would be to have a portfolio of 500 consolidated units. So I'm talking about organizations representing specific needs who need us to support their development. So I think just 30 seconds to conclude on this point, and then you will be able to talk a little bit, just allow time for your conclusion as well. But I was just wrapping up. We have a model that works, it's operational, and that would be reproducible across Quebec. And yeah, I mean, you're really talking about how consolidation can give people the tools to go further. And I think this is what you were touching on, that this is an opportunity. And so perhaps you could just conclude on that point. No, absolutely. I think it's really 2 sentences. If we don't consolidate, we are going to lose units. We need to take this route because we will lose housing. And if they're lost, they're going to be very hard to get back. So it's all well and good to develop new units, but if we don't maintain what's already there, they will be lost. So if we want to reach this famous 20% in Quebec, I think it would be very hard without consolidation. And I think it's fundamental that we go through this route. Consolidation is crucial. Based on that, if we consolidate intelligently, we can not only preserve, we can create even more. All the organizations we've recuperated have land available. Based on that, we could double the housing stock with a portfolio approach, a structured approach, with a program. Of course, we are lacking in programs. I'm sure that will come. But with the equity, with the financial levers available, we could double, maybe even triple the housing stock that's available. I could even see more than 20%. I'm sure we could reach 30% off-market housing. Consolidation is necessary not because the models that we have are insufficient. They're very good models, but we believe that it is necessary to provide these tools. We need to articulate these local models, that they remain rooted in the local needs of communities, but we need larger scale organizations. This doesn't mean that we are setting aside smaller, more local organizations. We want to help them consolidate and develop themselves. But if we want to develop, we need larger structures at a larger scale. Really, here we are talking about regional structures rather than national, but that understand the local realities, the context, and that are credible in that region. That's why Logéco is able to work. We are providing structure, we are developing because we have skills in development, and we can develop the housing volume in a way that is tailored to each region. Well, I just want to offer my immense gratitude to you, David. As David mentioned, there is a toolkit that is being developed right now, and many of your questions will be answered by that. I would maybe take these last 2 minutes. I mean, first of all, to thank you for your presence personally, but also to thank your entire team. I know there's a few different members of your team who are here on the call as well, and I want to thank my colleagues at the center who were able to put this webinar in place. And at the same time, maybe ask one or two last questions. My understanding is that there are acquisitions underway, but there's also developments that there could potentially be new construction that would be coming up. And I was wondering if the mergers and consolidations, are these limited to not-for-profit organizations? Does it involve cooperatives as well? Or sort of what's your vision of that? Well, thank you. Thank you very much to everyone at the center for your constant support and for giving me the opportunity to speak today. But yes, there are development projects underway, and they are very exciting. We are very eager to speak more about those. As you know, they take time. In terms of housing cooperatives, that has to be done. We're working in very close collaboration with the housing cooperative network, and we are working on shared projects that can reach both NPOs and co-ops. But we have been approached by a cooperative that absolutely wanted to join Logéco, and we worked with the Federation in Quebec, and the Housing Co-op Network, and to have them join Logéco. So here we're talking about an acquisition and a dissolution of assets in order to allow them in. We essentially be removing them from the Cooperative Act and transformation into NPO. But we do have an acquisition project right now focused on cooperatives. That is not our objective. However, we have more than enough to do with NPOs, but we are trying to work in collaboration with cooperative housing to continue some other projects. And so I think there's a great point to collaborate on collaboration, about dynamism, about teamwork. So I just want to thank you very much, David, and I'll pass the floor back to Gabrielle to conclude. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation. I want to thank you both and congratulations on all the work that has been done. I'm sure it's very inspiring to different regions across Quebec and even more broadly in Canada. So the presentation materials will be made available on our website along with the recording for the coming weeks. And if you would like to join us for the next webinar, it will be on June 23rd on the strategic journey of canoe. And so we'll be looking at a different project all the way out west.